The main reason I got involved was Pastor George. You asked me to be involved, and saw it as an opportunity to be a part of something pretty larger than myself, obviously, larger than the church, and I thought it'd be a great opportunity to learn how something like this takes place and how we go from what we have now to something on a much larger scale. And I've learned a lot. I just kind of sit back and listen, but when I feel there's a need to speak, I try and throw my 2 cents in and be as much of a part of it as I can. Well, one of the things I've noticed since I've been a member here is, and I've been a member since 2003 when I married Tricia, my wife, is there's a lot of younger people, but I don't necessarily feel like I know them. And I thought that a great opportunity to get to know people would be play basketball, volleyball, and if we could have a space to do that, I think that could really form a lot of bonds and friendships, and something that could last a lifetime. So if we had an area to do that, that would be wonderful, for both the men and the women. One of the things that I've learned, being a parent of a little 1.5-year-old, is we went through the stage of, the times when she'd be crying and we'd have to leave the sanctuary and kind of be away from the service, and if there would be some kind of a room, like a crying room, where younger couples could go with their children and still feel like they're a part of it without interrupting the service. I think that would be really nice, and kind of invite those type of people in, rather than them saying, oh well, I don't want to interrupt the service, so we're just going to stay away for a few months or something like that. Well, it's no big secret right now that there's just many babies that are coming into the congregation, which is a wonderful thing, and that's just going to continue to happen. For Tricia and I, we're planning on having another child or 2 in the near future, and that's just going to make the congregation grow. And obviously where we're at now, it'd be nice to have a little more space, a little more room for the education part of it, and it's definitely a need that we have, in order to grow, that we need more space. And it's just going to continue to happen that as more families come in and more babies, we're going to need that room. Oh, for myself, I love the 9:30 service. I grew up in a typical Methodist church. It was kind of regimented. You sing this hymn and do that. But the 9:30 service, it's more laid back. It's obviously contemporary. The messages are always great. And it's just a type of service that for younger couples like myself and Tricia, and for younger people, it's really inviting, and you feel like you're part of something where there's a lot of life and a lot of spirit. And I would tell anyone that is trying to decide to come here, it's a great service to come to. Get here early, try and find a seat. Otherwise, you might be standing in the back.